record and then I didn't do it. Okay. I am very excited to introduce our two presenters from Disability Rights Pennsylvania, Dale Verchick and Haviv Trocki-Videll. I'm going to introduce them, right? Did I pronounce both of your names
Yeah,
correctly? Okay.
perfect.
Okay. Um, so Dale Verchick is the Public Policy Manager at Disability Rights Pennsylvania, where she leads legislative and policy initiatives. She's been with DRP since 2008, previously coordinating the protection and advocacy for beneficiaries of Social Security grant. An immigrant who experienced displacement during the Gulf War, Dale brings a deep personal perspective to her advocacy. She also serves on the Pennsylvania Employment First Oversight Commission and the board of the Pennsylvania Assistive Technology Foundation. She holds a master's degree in law and public policy, along with bachelor's degrees in sociology and education. And then Haviv Trocki-Videll is a staff attorney with Disability Rights Pennsylvania. She earned her BA from Bryn Mawr College, an MA in Holocaust and Genocide Studies from Stockton University, and a JD from Villanova Law School. Before joining DRP, she volunteered with the Client Assistance Program in Philadelphia and worked in landlord-tenant law at Jack Trocki Development Company. Fighting for equal rights for individuals with disabilities has been her lifelong goal. In addition to her work as an attorney, Haviv is a mother, sister, daughter, and published poet. So please welcome Haviv and Dale. We are so excited to have you. Um, and take it away.
Thank you, everybody. And we are so excited to be here at the Penn Memory Center giving you this presentation. I am Dale Verchick, and we are just going to simply start with slides. This is some of our information here on the very first slide. But getting into objectives, we have some objectives that we'd like to cover today. Who we are as Disability Rights Pennsylvania. You are also going to learn from Haviv about your rights under the Americans with Disabilities Act. You'll hear that as being called the ADA, the Rehab Act, and the PHRA, which is the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act. Haviv is also going to talk about how to request reasonable accommodations from your employer. She's going to talk about how to file complaints for violations of the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Rehab Act, and the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act. And I am going to talk about some tools, resources for self-advocacy, and other related content to help folks in the employment arena. So who we are Disability Rights Pennsylvania. We are an independent nonprofit organization under Section 503 of the IRS tax code. So we are what is called a protection and advocacy agency, a PNA. And what a PNA is it is an enforcer of disability rights statutes. We are part of a PNA system, which is a national network of congressionally created, legally based disability rights agencies that have the authority to provide legal representation and other advocacy services under all federal and state laws to people with disabilities. However, our ability to provide legal and advocacy services is based on a set of priorities for services. So, sometimes we have to tell folks that we can't help because, if what they're calling about falls short of our priorities and objectives, then, we lack the resources to provide help. But all in all, we are here to improve disability services, to ensure folks' civil rights are upheld, to empower the community. We also provide technical and training assistance. We provide a significant amount of time ensuring full access to inclusive educational programs, financial entitlement, healthcare, accessible housing, and of course, what we're going to talk a lot about today is employment opportunities. And I'm not going to read through our mission. You'll find it on our website, but this is our mission. We have our vision statement. I like to focus on the vision statement, which is what is what we want to see is a commonwealth where people of all abilities are equal and free. And as I talked about earlier, we do have priorities and objectives that are set by a board. We do have a board comprising of folks with disabilities in Pennsylvania from the community. So they set these priorities and objectives for us. And pretty much everything that we do has to fall under these priorities and objectives that are set by our board. Folks ask us how we are able to do our work. We are a federally funded organization primarily. These are the different funding sources that we have. So we are able to help folks, for example, if they have an intellectual disability, we are able to serve them using monies from what is called the PAD grant, Protection and Advocacy for Individuals with Developmental Disabilities. So the federal government basically gives out these grants to all the state PNAs, different state PNAs, that we are able to serve folks, but they're very limited. They're very specific in their focus. So, for example, and again, this is not something, I mean, we as an organization really have to focus on this part, but I just wanted to highlight how we are able to help folks. So we do have PAMI is what we use to serve folks with mental illness. PAIR is protection and advocacy for individual rights. And unfortunately, at this very moment, we are unable to serve folks in our PAIR grant because we don't have enough of that money.
Actually,
yeah.
Can I do a caveat?
Yeah.
You can still call the intake line, and we
Yeah.
will give you all the information that we had at the take your time that could help you self-advocate within the first phone call, but you cannot get assistance beyond that. That is what we mean. We give information to anybody who calls, even if they're not within our priorities, we'll give them information and references.
Right. So, thank you, Haviv. Thank you for that. And again, any folks contacting us for help around assistive technology needs, denial of assistive technology, we serve under PAAT. Today's presentation is actually going to be funded by PABS, which is Protection and Advocacy for Beneficiaries of Social Security, and we'll talk a little bit more about PABS. And this is for folks who are receiving Social Security benefits, who have the desire to go to work or to try working and eventually work themselves off of Social Security benefits. We understand that not everybody wants to work, but there are some people who want to try to work. And so we are able to serve folks and give them information if they are facing any kind of barriers to employment, being beneficiaries, we can serve them under this particular grant. And then we have voting accessibility, a specific grant that helps us help folks who have voting accessibility needs, traumatic brain injury. We help folks who are experiencing any kind of abuse and neglect or misappropriation of their funds by their payees. So we help protect those rights. WIPA, which is the Work Incentive Planning and Assistance. And then we have the COVID-19 vaccine, which actually we should probably take off because we don't have any more money under that particular grant anymore. Anyway, so this is what funds us. We do have some other funds that we are trying to diversify. We do get some local funds. We work through people's donations, some local foundations. So we do have other funding sources that can help if we should run out of some of the monies from here. But again, it's something that our teams have to figure out how to work that out. Since we are using PABS monies to present, I'm going to just focus a little bit very, very quickly on what we do under PABS. So PABS stands for Protection and Advocacy for Beneficiaries of Social Security. This program was established back in 1999 under the Ticket to Work and Work Incentive Improvement Act. And under this particular act, grants to the protection and advocacy programs allowed us to provide advocacy and other services to assist folks who are beneficiaries of Social Security and if they wanted to go back to work. Because at the time, Congress recognized that many folks with disabilities were facing major barriers in their efforts to leave, to leave their benefits for full employment. So they authorized, Congress authorized Social Security to make payments to the protection and advocacy systems in each state so that they could provide information and advocacy services to beneficiaries with disabilities who wanted to work and wanted to secure gainful employment. And what is our purpose? Specifically of PABs is to provide healthcare, employment preparation, to encourage, in the policy work that we do using PABs monies, we encourage states to expand Medicaid availability to folks with disabilities, to workers with disabilities, to expand Medicare availability, and to obtain necessary services and support so that they can reduce their dependency on cash benefits while they try to get back into the workforce. And at Disability Rights, this is the kind of advocacy we've done, transition services from work to school. So folks who are exploring going to a post-secondary education setting, if they have any kind of issues getting supported or customized employment, if they are having issues getting personal assistance services, because, folks might need that when they are, getting ready to go to work. Any kind of problems getting assistive technology, transportation is a huge piece, especially here in Pennsylvania. I think it's nationwide, but here in Pennsylvania, the lack of transportation or the inaccessibility of transportation for folks who want to go to work, and any kind of housing barriers that are going to prohibit folks getting to work. And I like to give the example in housing. A while ago, a client contacted us saying that she was getting late to work. She had just moved into a new apartment and the apartment bathroom was inaccessible. So she took, another 15, 20 minutes or even half an hour to get ready because she had to be very careful using the shower, the inaccessible shower. And so she was getting late to work. She was at risk of losing her job. She was a beneficiary of Social Security. So she really wanted to try to get to work and work herself off of benefits. And so Disability Rights helped her. We contacted her landlord. We explained that she needed her bathroom to be modified and made accessible so that she could get ready quickly and get to work on time. And they did. And she was able to keep her job, which was a great success story for her and for us. So those are the kinds of PABs advocacy that we work on. So anything that relates to making sure folks get to work and getting rid of any kind of barriers.
When they're in work. So if you get there and your employer is discriminating against you, we can help with that too.
Right. I'm gonna give this over to Haviv.
Okay. So before I get started, I always like to start during this to remind people that, and as you know, people with disabilities are human individuals just like everyone else. They have feelings, emotions, abilities, family, jobs, hobbies, dislikes and likes, problems and joys. While the disability is an integral part of who they are, it doesn't define them alone. Don't make them into heroes or victims. You treat them as individuals. You treat them as humans. No two people with even the same disability is alike. Treat everyone as people and respect them as you would like to be respected. I'd like to point out that the laws in place are not in place to assume that anyone with a disability is different, but to protect individuals with disabilities from being seen and treated differently from other human individuals. Okay, next slide. We always have to put this in here, or at least say it. This presentation, or this part of it, is a legal presentation for information only. This does not establish an attorney-client privilege with any of the viewers. Each instance is a case-by-case, or I should say, instance. And if you have individual problems, you call the helpline. the intake line, and we deal with it. This is just for information purposes. All the information is correct, but it doesn't state exactly what would happen in one particular instance. Okay, so now we'll go to the laws defining the rights of individuals with disabilities. There are three main laws I'm going to talk about today: the Rehab Act, the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. From now on, I'll be calling it the Rehab Act because that's a mouthful. It was the first law that actually prohibited employment discrimination against qualified individuals with disabilities who work for the federal government and entities that receive federal funding. So if you have a federal employee or you're a federal employee, that's one of the acts that would apply to you. Then in 1990, the Americans with Disabilities Act came along, and it prohibits discrimination against qualified individuals with disabilities who work for state government, local government, or private businesses of 15 or more employees. Next slide. Each state, well, I'm also going to talk about the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act, which is the state of Pennsylvania's equivalent to the ADA, but it does more or protects more people because it prohibits discrimination against all employees by private employers with 4 or more employees, not 15. Otherwise, it's the same prohibitions for all state and local government employees as well. All right, next slide. Each state has its own disability rights laws that mirror the ADA, but may actually grant more protections. So this presentation is based on Pennsylvania and federal law. This is the only thing I'm authorized to talk about. But each state has its own equivalent to their state PHI, like Human Relations Act law. I don't know what they call but that's what they are. So in other words, the ADA establishes the baseline, the minimum requirements that each state must follow, and each state can do more, but they can't do less. As I said, DIP only has the authority to talk about Pennsylvania laws and federal laws. Next slide. So what types of actions are considered discrimination in employment? The laws that I just spoke about protect against harassment by individuals, harassment of individuals because someone found out or thinks or was told that the individual has a disability. So that's the regarded as clause. Assuming that, and you're also protected from being assumed that you're not qualified to do the job just because they have a disability. Okay. Also, the next type of discrimination that it covers is denying the individual with a disability a reasonable accommodation if they need it and request it, or without offer of alternate accommodation of comparable effect. So basically, the ADA and the PHRA say that you have a right not to be discriminated against because of your disability. As long as you're a qualified individual and can do the essential functions of your job, which I'll talk about a little more later, we can even give you reasonable accommodations to enable you to do that if you request them. And also, you can't be retaliated against as an individual with a disability for exercising your right to request an accommodation or to even to report disability-related harassment. So those are the types of discrimination that these laws help protect against. Next slide. So who is protected? A qualified individual with a disability. Next slide. Who is a qualified individual with a disability? So what is the definition of a disability? The statutory definition of a disability is a person who has a physical or mental impairment that causes substantial limitation of one or more major life activities or major bodily functions, or they have a record of having such an impairment, or they're regarded as having such an impairment. Next slide. So what are some major life activities or major bodily function examples? And this is not an exhaustive list. If you can't care for yourself, eat, sleep, breathe, walk, stand, bend, working, performing manual tasks, hearing, speaking, any of the senses. learning, concentrating, thinking, communicating, interacting with others, even working out, or if like organs don't work in your body and they're displayed as something, or genetic mutations, or it's not an exhaustive list. Next slide. So here we have something. Even if you have an episodic impairment or you use mitigating measures to help with your disability, you still have a disability under the laws. In other words, an impairment that is episodic or in remission is a disability if it still substantially limits your major life activities when active. Examples, like people who have epilepsy don't always continually have seizures, but they still are considered to have a disability under these definitions. And people who are bipolar, if they take medication, they can sometimes, manage their symptoms, but that still means that they have a disability. Same thing with PTSD or MS, or wearing hearing aids or glasses or going to behavioral therapy doesn't mean that you no longer have a disability. They're just aids that help you deal with that disability. So, yes, you still have a disability under those laws. Okay.
So we have a hypothetical question here, and we're asking you to be the judge. So Maria has MS, or multiple sclerosis. Her symptoms are mostly controlled by medication, but she still experiences some fatigue. She's not had an MS flare in a year. So is she a person with a disability under the ADA? What do you think? And I know you probably are all muted and can't answer, but we'll answer that for you.
You can also are you okay if people put their answer in the chat?
Yeah, and you can, Allison, if you could
Okay,
tell us what.
Don't give them the answer. Oh man, we just
Okay, put your answer in the chat if you can.
Haviv, can you see the answers? Because I can't, since I'm advancing the
I'm looking at the
slides.
chat right now. I don't see anything in the chat.
Yeah, there's nothing in there so far.
Okay, but everyone now says there is one. It says yes.
Yes.
Okay, yes, you're right. For the same reasons that I just explained before the hypothetical.
Okay.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Under the law, the condition that is a disability, yes. So to repeat myself, a condition is a disability even if it's not apparent or the symptoms are not exacerbated presently, or devices or aids that help mitigate the symptoms. If you use them, they're still present if the individual has the disability that still substantially impairs the person. Next slide. Bye. So who is a qualified individual with a disability employment? So we already defined what a disability is. Now we're going to define what qualified means. An employee is qualified for the position if they meet two requirements. The employee satisfies the requisite skills, must satisfy the requisite skills, experience, education, and other job-related requirements, and they can perform the essential functions of the position they don't have to need reasonable accommodations, but if they even need reasonable accommodations to do the essential functions, as long as they can do the essential functions of the job with accommodations, they are qualified. The statute is actually worded like that, and it does make people confused because whatever, but I hope I explained it better. Okay, next slide. So what are some essential job functions? The definition of essential job functions is a working definition, pardon the pun, means that they are the key responsibilities of requirements of a particular job. Various factors may be considered when determining whether a job function is essential, including, but not limited to, an employer's judgment, the job description, the amount of time spent performing the job, the consequences of not requiring the person to perform the function, and the terms of a collective bargaining agreement, work experience other people have had who currently hold positions like the one were similar positions. Next slide. When to disclose the disability. Now, as I mentioned briefly earlier, you are protected against harassment even if you don't disclose the disability and somebody thinks you have it or finds out that you have it. So you don't have to disclose your disability at all, ever, unless you are requesting a reasonable accommodation. But there are some other reasons you may want to disclose. And they are if you're applying for a position with an employer that has an affirmative action plan for the people with disabilities, or you're applying for or working for a known disability-friendly employer, or your disability makes you more qualified for the job. I like the third one. Note, voluntary disclosures or request for affirmative action purposes, you can disclose it, but not required. So those questions on your job applications such as they're not starred, and there's like, you're not required to, but if you want to, because we have an affirmative action plan, you can tell us who you are, and they can ask that, but you don't have to. Next slide. When does protections from disability discrimination begin? Discrimination is prohibited in any facet of employment, even before you're employed, including the job application procedures, hiring and firing, benefits and compensation, advancement, training, any terms, conditions, privileges of employment, refusing to provide reasonable accommodations, and with regard to certain medical exams and inquiries. So you're protected against having to answer certain medical exams and inquiries, and I'll go into that a little further on the next slide, which we'll do now. So job application process, this pre-offer protection, is that you don't have to disclose your disability, so you don't also have to disclose medical information unless it has to do with the essential functions of the job. For example, can you lift a certain amount of weight? If somebody, this is an example I like to give, but say you have a wheelchair and the job that you're applying for involves stocking of something or reaching stock shelves sometimes to do something. If they ask you, well, you work in the supermarket, how are you going to restock the shelf? The answer is, well, I'm still qualified because my wheelchair is one of those wheelchairs that puts me up on a standing position and then I can reach. That's the kind of question they can answer. They can also ask questions if everyone has to answer those questions, like if you're an air traffic control person and they're not allowed, they have to have perfect vision or something, they can ask you about your vision and stuff like that. They can ask for self-identification information for affirmative action purposes only. No medical exam except if it deals with the essential functions of the job, and everybody has to go through it. Next slide. After the job application process, after you've been offered the position, it is permissible for them to ask additional medical questions or require a medical examination if it's needed for the essential functions of the job. For example, everyone is subject to these questions. If everyone is subject to these questions, then you have to answer the questions too. And all, this is very important, all medical information, even if it's gathered because they need it for the essential functions of the job, must remain confidential. And even if you ask for a reasonable accommodation, it's only shared with whoever it is that needs to know about your reasonable accommodation. Next slide.
Okay, we have a hypothetical coming up here. So does an employer have to give preference to a qualified applicant with a disability over other applicants? I'll read that again. Does an employer have to give preference to a qualified applicant with a disability over other applicants, and you can put your answer in the chat. So Allison is going to facilitate that part. Let us know.
Very good. We have an answer.
If someone says no, is that the correct answer?
Yes,
Okay.
it is. The answer is no. Under the ADA and also the PHIA and the Rehab Act, an employer is free to select the most qualified applicant available and to make decisions based on reasons unrelated to the existence or the consequence of a disability.
Okay.
So in other words, it's not an affirmative action plan. They don't have to say you have to have this many people.
And we have
100
another,
more anyway.
yeah,
Mhm.
we have another hypothetical. Does having a disability protect an individual from being fired or laid off? Does having a disability protect an individual from being fired or laid off? Any answers there?
Okay, we got one no. It looks like it got sent directly to me.
Well, anybody else? Is that it? Okay.
Yeah, another no.
So basically, it does not protect them from being laid off unless they're only being laid off because they have a disability. If if they're no longer qualified for the job, they can be laid off. If there's a general shutdown and downsize, they can be laid off. The only time they can't be laid off is if you're laying them off because they asked for something or you found out they have a disability and you don't want to deal with it anymore. They can't lay you off for that, but it has to be, oh, you have to have proof that they're only laying you off because you have a disability. Okay. And if they're laying you off because you have a disability or they refuse to provide reasonable accommodations, this is a violation of the ADA, the PHIA, and the Rehab Act. Next slide. All right, now we're going to talk about reasonable accommodations. So remember how I said you're qualified if you can do the essential functions of the job, even if you need reasonable accommodations to do that? Well, what are reasonable accommodations? They can be modifications or adjustments to work the environment or the manner of circumstance under which the position is customarily performed that enable the qualified individual with a disability to access the application process, perform the essential functions of the job, and enjoy equal benefits and privileges of employment. Okay, so you need it for training, you need it for job applications, you need it for whatever. You have to ask for it, but they can give it to you, and they are required to if you ask. They're not allowed to assume that you need it, so you have to ask. Next slide. Some examples of accommodations that may be reasonable for application process. And I use the word may be reasonable because what is reasonable in one circumstance doesn't have to be reasonable in all circumstances. Every reasonable accommodation is based on the individual job and individual circumstance and individual essential functions of the job. All right, so these are just examples of things that you can ask for and may be reasonable depending on your circumstance and the job that you have. So conducting the interview, well, usually for application processes, these are usually available. Conducting the interview in a physically accessible location, providing or allowing sign language interpreters for interviews, modifying test materials, replacing written tests with a more extensive interview, or you could even try to ask for oral interviews, allowing support person and also your service animal to be in the interview. Those are examples, not an exhaustive list. Next slide. Again, examples of accommodations that may be considered reasonable during employment, depending on your job, and if it doesn't cause an undue burden, which I will discuss later, assigning tasks orally instead of in writing if you need it, making the workplace accessible to and usable by people with a disability. ADA has requirements about accessible bathrooms and stuff like that, but also workspaces. You can eliminate marginal tasks. So as long as you're not eliminating an essential function, maybe you can eliminate it or ask for it to be eliminated or give it to someone else or some other way to do it. Modifying the affected person's work schedule. You can ask for scent-free restricted scent policies, allowing periods of leave. You can do it paid, but mostly it's unpaid as a reasonable accommodation. You can also ask for modifying equipment. Lots of people with autism or people with dexterity issues or whatever, they need noise canceling headphones or a modified computer or you name it. There are zero gravity work test spaces. There's all kinds of stuff. All right, next slide. You can also ask for provided readers to accommodate individuals who are blind. I think we talked about leave, but extended leave past FMLA for treatment or recovery as long as there's an end date. It seems to be reasonable. Allowing a job coach. I mentioned service animal, telework, or actually remote work in certain circumstances, as long as you can still do the essential functions of the job, obviously. Then there's something that's accommodation of last resort, which might actually be something that people with Alzheimer's will eventually need and ask for, is a transfer to a vacant position for individual is qualified for. That's accommodation of last resort. It doesn't mean, unlike workers' compensation, where it's like for 6 weeks, this would be if there's an open position available and you're still qualified for it, and you can't do the other thing, and you want to go part-time, and there's something open part-time, you can from now on maybe ask to be in that position that would make you a part-time employee or whatever. But that would be it for the duration of your need, forever. From like, hi, I can no longer work 40 hours a week, but there's a position open that's 30 hours a week. I'd like to do that permanently. There's a whole bunch of other ideas. Again,
and before I advance to the next slide, and we will cover this under our resources, there is JAM, which is the Job Accommodation Network, a great organization that will actually tell you exactly, you can, there's different fields that you can input information for your need, and it will produce a set of different reasonable accommodations that you can ask for, which is so helpful. And it's like Haviv explained, it's non-exhaustive, right?
If you don't want to do it by computer and you want to talk to somebody,
you can call. Yeah, you certainly can call them and get information that way too.
Okay. So the basics for requesting a reasonable accommodation in employment. A qualified employee must request the accommodation. I mean, you don't have to request it the second you have the job, but you have to request it the second we prefer or recommend that you request it when you realize that you need it. This triggers an interactive process between the person requesting and the employer, because they have to find an accommodation that, remember I said you can't be denied reasonable accommodation, but your request may not be considered reasonable, but there might be something else that they have to offer that's comparable that can give you what you need. Also, must note that for this particular reasonable accommodation, you cannot ask for reasonable accommodations unless you actually have a disability. Those people who are regarded as don't actually have a disability. They are protected from harassment for thinking they have a disability, but they can't ask for reasonable accommodations. Okay, but they can. Oh, go back to the slide for 1 second because this is very important. If you have someone you know, and you're associated with someone with a disability, and they are your employer is discriminating against you because you are associated with someone who has a disability, then you can actually file a complaint and for violations of the ADA and the PHI. Okay. Next slide, please. How to request a reasonable accommodation. Well, it's not required that the reasonable accommodation request be in writing, but we recommend that it is. And writing can be an email, it can be a text message, but here's what the reason we ask or recommend that people request things in writing is that when and if it is denied or you're retaliated against because of it, when you file complaints, you have to file administrative complaints, and they were going to ask for proof. Well, how do you prove that a tree fell in the forest if nobody saw you write something, heard you do something, or whatever? So paper trail is key. The writing may be from your doctor or medical professional if the employer asks. That usually happens when the impairment is not something that is apparent and seeable, I guess. I think I just created a new word. The writing must state that you have a disability that substantially limits a major life activity or bodily function, that you can do the essential functions of the job, but that you need a reasonable accommodation to do the essential functions of the job, and how the reasonable accommodation will let you do that. Next slide, please. As I mentioned before, the accommodations are not always required. They're not required. The law states that they're not required. You're required to do so unless it's an undue burden or hardship, or it causes a direct threat to the health and safety of yourself or others. Undue burden and unreasonable are kind of the same thing. They just use different whatever. It's unreasonable if it's an undue burden or poses an undue burden on other employers, like giving on other employees a employer cannot create a new job position for you. They cannot do away with essential functions of the job and make it somebody else's job. This happens a lot when people ask for different nursing staff. Work schedules are something that's generally asked for and worked for a lot of things, except if you're in the medical field itself, because they don't necessarily think that doctors, nurses, and medical staff should have to come in 2 hours early because somebody else needs to come in 2 hours later all the time. So to recap a little bit, they can't require, as I said, and they also can't leave the person unqualified. So if you can't do the essential functions of the job anymore, or you're asking for the essential functions of the job to be removed, then you're no longer qualified for that particular position. It also can't lower production standards. It can require a person to provide personal items or result in a change of supervisor. Now, let me go a little bit about the change of supervisor thing, because that's a little bit different. Sometimes harassment happens by supervisors. That is not a reasonable accommodation request that it's removed, but you can get it. The supervisor reprimanded or removed if you say he, she, they are harassing you, and that's the other protection, but it's not for reasonable accommodations. If somebody is being harassed because they have a disability, the correct way to do that would be to alert HR or whoever your handbook says to alert. And then, like sexual harassment or race harassment, you go through the same kind of channels, and the employer has to do something to stop the harassment. And if they don't, you can file complaints, just like how I'm going to tell you how to file complaints for reasonable accommodation denials. So you can't change your supervisor as a reasonable accommodation, but you can if they're harassing you and you do it in a different way, but it's still not a reasonable accommodation. Next slide.
Okay, we have a hypothetical coming up. So, Bill does not have a disability, but has a spouse with MS. He asks for an accommodation. That's a modified work schedule so that he can take his spouse to physical therapy appointments. His employer says no. Does this violate the ADA? I'll just repeat that again. Bill does not have a disability, but the spouse has MS. He asks for an accommodation. modified work schedule so that he can take his spouse to physical therapy appointments, and his employer says no. Does this violate the ADA?
Let's check the. Let's see if I see anything. We have. I think we might have an answer, or maybe that's the old answer. Let me see. Rosemary has answered. No, that was before. Maybe
What
they're
does
just
anybody
tired
think?
of answering. I'll give another. Yes. Does that violate the ADA? Patricia said yes. Anybody else have another answer? I'm going to explain it anyway.
Okay, I'll move
Okay.
on to the next screen.
Actually, that does not violate the ADA. What it violates, or what it falls under, laws give a qualified employee with a disability the right to request and receive reasonable accommodations. However, Bill does not have a disability and therefore doesn't have the right to ask for reasonable accommodations in employment. He can, however, request leave under the Family Medical Leave Act, but that's not really a disability discrimination law. But so he would be using the FMLA and ask for it as an FMLA. And if you have a good employer, they would say, well, it's not whatever, but what you really want to do is ask for FMLA leave. Okay. However, as I said before, the employer may violate the ADA if they discriminate against somebody who's asking for FMLA because of their spouse's, family members, or whatever disability. Okay. But that's a different kind of violation. Next slide. All right, now we're going to talk about a little bit about how to file charges. So let's say, like I said, person X asked for a reasonable accommodation of a flex schedule to go to infusion appointments or behavioral appointments, and they haven't been denied. What happened was they were approved, but then they were retaliated again for asking for this because they were given more work as a result of asking for the reasonable accommodation. So yes, you can file complaints for any of this kind of thing. And depending on the type of employer you have, depends on which administrative complaint you have to file first. You can't bypass and just sue. It's an unfortunate thing, but you have to file administrative complaints first. So for federal employees, they must file with the EEO counselor where you work or applied to work. And this actually must be done, the statute of limitation for it, within 45 days of the discriminatory action. For private and state employees, you file with the EEOC. If you're a direct hire. Now, unfortunately, there's a caveat in the EEOC that they didn't really intend. Only direct hires can file EEOC claims. But don't worry, because each state allows it through their state law. And this must be done within 300 days of this. For the EEOC complaint, you must file within 300 days of the discriminatory action. So don't wait and say, oh, last year I did this. You have to, as soon as it happens, even if it's harassment, you give them a chance to fix it. And if they don't, you say, okay, they haven't fixed this, they're brushing it off, they retaliated against me or whatever. And you say, this is the date they did that. And you don't wait. You do. Now the EEOC just recently reopened. So it is backlogged. So what we've been telling people to do, and you can file with both the EEOC and the PHRC if you have a local or state employee or private employer. Okay. So it's not one or the other. It can be both. All right. So we've been telling people to file with the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission. You only have 6 months from the Discriminatory Act to do that. After that, and you don't need a lawyer to do that, there's an online form. You fill it out. It tells you And if you call in and take line, I can tell you further how to do this, but you fill it in, or you have somebody help you fill it in. And they even have a phone number if you need help filling it in, but you have to submit the form. The phone number will only be there to help you fill out the form. Anyway, so after you fill out the form, you email it to them. Their email address is on the website that they have, and they then have 180 days. They'll have somebody call you, a representative call you to make sure that they have all the information, and then they'll start an investigative process. The investigative process can take up to 180 days, after which you have three things that can happen. They can either tell you that the way in which you wrote your complaint does not provide evidence that discrimination happened. It doesn't mean it didn't. It means you have to regroup and submit it again. But sometimes it means it didn't happen. Or they say, you have a right to sue. Here's a right to sue letter. And under the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act, you get 2 years to find a private lawyer and take it to court. The EEOC only gives you 6 months after you get the right to sue letter. So, and since they're backlogged anyway, try to do it with the PHRC first. Or sometimes my favorite is they say, not only, the PHRC will say, not only did they discriminate, but we're going to mediate on it on your behalf. Sometimes that happens. I don't know how often, but in that case, if they're going to mediate it on your behalf, then you don't need to hire a private lawyer at that particular time. Okay? So they'll find, like I said, they'll do a finding. You'll get a letter and an email. They send, they don't call. Next slide, please. Here is the list of websites. Now, remember, for private employers of 15 or more, it's that's the website for the EEOC, right? And then for private employers of 4 or more, that's the PHRC. For the actions that violate the federal law, remember I said you have to call your EEO counselor, and they'll tell you how to do that. And you don't dawdle with that because there's only a 45-day statute of limitations for that one. Okay, now I think I'll hand it over to Dale.
Thanks, Haviv. And as I explained earlier, we have some resources, that we wanted to list out here for you. We have the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation that helps folks, in their quest for work. If you're a person with a disability, you can contact them, and they will help you through that process. They will assign you a counselor, and they will walk with you through that process of finding a job. They don't actually find the job for you. That's kind of a misconception that OVR is going to find me a job. It's inaccurate. They will help you in that process, help you maybe develop a resume. They'll give you some leads on where to look for jobs. One of the job leads websites that they send you to is CareerLink, which is the next one on this list. One-stop career link centers that contain, they have a job bank with various jobs. You can actually customize it to your need or what you're interested in doing for employment, and then it gives you a list of different things in wherever you are in Pennsylvania. Also, there's Goodwill here. AAPD, which is the American Association of People with Disabilities. We have internships and different other programs. And again, your regular job boards like Monster, Indeed, LinkedIn, Key Recruiter. If you are a person who is a beneficiary, that means if you have Social Security benefits and you don't know how all of this is going to affect your benefits, there's a Ticket to Work program. You can go to that Choose Work website through Social Security and tell them that you have a job lined up or you are interested in finding a job, and they will refer you to your WIPA, which is your Work Incentive and planning assistance program. And the WIPA counselors, or they're also called CWICs, which is a community work incentive coordinator, will sit down with you and uh, kind of go through your individual situation, look at your job, how much you earn, how it's going to affect your benefits, and help you to apply work incentives to help you, through that process of working. The whole idea is to work yourself off of the benefit. So, I like to tell people that, give them that information so that they know that, you can't forever work. I mean, there's some people who do work and get the benefit, but the whole idea is to work yourself off of the benefit. And finally, JAN, which is the Job Accommodation Network, a really fabulous resource where you can either call them if you don't want to use their website, but their website is awesome. You can customize the kind of accommodation that you might need, based on your need. And gives you a ton of different accommodations that you can ask for, based on your situation, based on the need, your disability, where you work, the kind of job that you're doing. Very
Now,
helpful.
oh, I forgot something. Another good resource for finding out what you might need other than leave would be your health professional.
Mm-hmm.
Find out, like, can I work? What can I do? How it is. Like, if you're cleared for work, but you need reasonable accommodation to go back, especially if you're on leave as a reasonable accommodation, ask your doctor what you need to do the essential functions of your job. Because and for that letter, they're going to ask a doctor to write it. You can't call me and have me write it. I can tell you what kind of information the doctor would want. I mean, the employer would need to put in there, but make him know that, yes, he said you can do the essential functions of the job, but you need this. Okay, well, that has to be in the letter. And give them alternatives. Sometimes you need to help give them alternatives to your employers. That is.
Thanks, Haviv. And the next slide is basically our contact information. How you can contact us. We have our intake line open Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. You will have somebody answer live. If you call outside of those hours, you are able to leave a message and somebody will contact you back within 24 hours, business hours. And you can also, if you don't want to call, you have the option to go onto our website, which is www.disabilityrightspa.org. And you can go on to our intake, the section that says need help, and you can actually fill in an intake form, and it goes to our intake team. They will process that information, and one of the advocates or attorneys will call you to gather more information or to provide you with technical assistance or short-term assistance or just information and referrals. We do have some time for questions. I will add that we can answer general questions right now and give general information right now. If you have a particular question specific to your situation, we really encourage you to contact us through our intake service that we have. So again, if you have any questions, this is the time to ask. I'm going to stop sharing the screen, and I'm going to give you, I think we have a hard cutoff in like 10 minutes, right? So if anybody has
15.
50, okay, we'll give you 15
Oh,
minutes
yeah.
if you have questions, right?
Yeah.
But this is your time to ask.
I'll take the last question in 10. Maybe.
There you go.
Yeah. If you don't want to speak it, you can write it in the chat. Anyone?
Does anyone have questions specific maybe to someone having mild dementia or mild cognitive impairment in the workplace? Like, generally, what would be your advice for someone who is well enough to work, But we anticipate, because they have a neurodegenerative condition, that over time that's going to change. Generally, what would you tell them?
Okay. Well, generally, and this is very broad because I can't say,
Sure.
but until they actually feel the symptoms of impairment,
Hmm.
I would not. I mean, I can't tell people what to do, but you don't have to ask for reasonable accommodation because you don't know what you'll need. So,
Right.
uh, the problem is when people find out, even though it's illegal to do so, the employers will do it. And then time will pass. And because it's Alzheimer's or early onset dementia or whatever, by the time something gets heard, they won't be able to go to work. So, what I suggest is until you need the reasonable accommodation, don't ask for it. But as soon as you do, talk to your doctor, line it up so that you'll know, hi, this is what's going to happen first. I mean, I shouldn't say nobody knows, but whatever they think might be happening and they can track your progress or whatever, they can say, okay, well, you can no longer do this. So if you can no longer do this or you need to do this without speaking or without moving your arm or whatever, you can ask if you can still you know, craft a reasonable accommodation, but talk to your medical providers and wait till, I shouldn't say wait. I would advise not to do it and say, well, I have really onset, but the doctor doesn't think it's going to affect me for a year. You don't go around saying that because you don't need it yet. Because even if your employer doesn't do it, your employees can sometimes be really harsh and start, making fun of you and harassing you. And then you got that. And we all know that stress exacerbates uh, certain conditions, especially with memory. Although I am not a medical professional, so don't quote me.
No, that's correct. That's correct.
I do have family members that are experiencing um, Alzheimer's related to other medical conditions. So that's where I get my input.
That's really
But as soon
helpful.
as you know, ask. But first, as soon as you know, ask the doctor and then have something ready. Like have the letter because they're not going to see it. Dementia is not something you actually see unless somebody is, spacing out and whatever, like more not mild, but more uh, advanced. Okay. So as soon as you feel it, or as soon as you know it, contact a medical professional, have a plan laid out to what they need that would help them do the essential functions of the job. And remember that there's always I can't do this anymore, but I see this position's open. I'm asking to be put on part-time here. That would be what I would suggest. But then again, this is just general information. I am not anybody's attorney, and I might be able to give you more specific information if you call the intake line.
That's very helpful. Thank you. We know we're all asking for general advice, and we promise
Yeah,
not to say that this is advice our
I
personal
mean,
attorney
I
gave.
cannot tell somebody what to do, but until you need the reasonable accommodation, unless of course you have an employer that knows about this or whatever, or is disability friendly.
Does anyone
Okay,
else
and
have questions for Haviv or for Dale?
Well, we are very open to folks contacting us or emailing the intake. I always say there's no um, question that is unreasonable, right? If it is, we'll tell you we can't help you or we can't answer that question. But,
and even
please
if we
do.
can't, oh, I'm sorry, even if we can't answer the question, we will give you resources to
Mhm.
someone who can.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, please do call us about your individual situations. And, even if there are issues on a systemic level, that need to be addressed, like on the state level or what have you, we're always very interested in hearing those issues and kind of, getting our noses into those kind of issues so that we can address them on a systemic level. So we do like those cases. So definitely contact us so that we can address them and so that we can help all folks get employed or get the services that they need. Again, this is not, we talked a lot about employment, but again, disability rights handles a lot of various issues around. It's very,
there is an assistive technology grant. We can do a lot with that.
yes, yes. So various issues that we can help with around other disabilities or disability services. So please do call us. And it was a wonderful opportunity to be here. Allison, thank you so much for inviting us. We are honored. And, everybody, if you don't have any questions, I think we can end the presentation, Allison.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for
I think we have
that,
one. I think we have one question actually. I see someone just unmuted
I was
herself.
just going to say that you did a really good job, both of you.
Oh,
Thank
that's nice.
you.
Thanks for.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We appreciate that and appreciate you all. And again, feel free to contact us as needed.
should we put the contact slide up one more time?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be great.
Let
That would
me
be great.
share. Let me share with you.
While you're doing that, I'll just make a few really quick announcements.
Okay.
So thank you again to Dale and Haviv. This was very helpful and informative. Um, we will be editing this and putting it on our website. And then our next Empowering Caregivers lecture, which is the last of the year for December, is on December 12th from 12 to 2. I'm actually presenting this year. I'm going to be talking about preparing for the holidays, preparing for seeing extended family when you're caring for someone with dementia or when you have dementia, and understanding and managing family dynamics and how they change in the context of a dementia diagnosis. So we'll be talking about it theoretically, but mostly practically in terms of some tips for providing education to your family, setting boundaries, maybe renegotiating how you usually hold your family gatherings and your holiday gatherings. So hopefully this will be helpful not just for the winter holidays, but for other life cycle events throughout the year. So that is on our website at pennmemorycenter.org. Thank you so much again to Dale and Haviv, and we'll hope to see you next month.
With the pleasure to be here. You're welcome.
Okay. Take care, everybody. Have a happy holiday.